Hello and welcome to this DungeonFog tutorial where we're going to be adding an extra level to a Lunatic Asylum and seeing how we can do it in such a way that it tells us a more interesting story than perhaps it normally would. So I'm going to open up behind me the DungeonFog map that I have created, and we're going to go through that. Now what I have done, the reason why the map may not look as spectacular as it could, is that I've gone over to the lighting section, which you can't see behind me, but I promise you it's there. It's that giant light illumination button, and there's another option, let me get out of the way here, which says hide all lights. You can see my cursor just there. Now that hide all lights allows us to turn the lighting system off. And the important thing about that is it allows us to navigate our map quite quickly without having to process shadows and things. So if I turn it back on again, you're going to see what the map actually looks like. That's a lot more dramatic. Let me just zoom in there and you can have a look and see. So this is a health spa that I have designed for a module that Patreons of our channel will get at the end of this month. So if you are a Patreon, or if your GM is a Patreon, this is a map that you might be encountering. So this is a health spa that I've made. It is fairly detailed because the entire adventure takes place within this space. We've got our main hallway, we've got offices and a ballroom and sort of a conservatory and all those kinds of things. So when I turn the lights off, it moves, the map sort of responds a lot better and allows us to navigate around a lot better, and yeah, we can add detailing without sort of having to load it every single time. Now I do have an area out here that's rather devoid of information at the moment. There's not a lot here. The reason for that is I'm still debating what I'm going to put here. I suspect it's going to be a tennis court, or perhaps it's a firing range. I'm not sure yet. I don't know. But what I do know is that I want the second floor to be added. There will also be a basement level, so I'm going to have to think about that too. Now, again, I know I've sort of done more tutorial type stuff here than anything else. That's not the point. The point is now making and telling a story. So when we think about this sort of Lunatic Asylum, I have built in, as you can see here, this grand staircase which leads up underneath this particular chandelier here. It leads up to the second floor. Then there is a circular spiral staircase here in the tower of the demented doctor, who has a table where he sort of does experiments on the patients themselves, as well as then, I believe, another spiral staircase over here in the library area, or the this would probably be more as with a drawing room of some kind. So there's another access point there, and that's pretty much it in terms of how to get to the upper floor. Then if I go over here into the pool room, there isn't a second floor, but it is going to have a second level, if you like, so that people can sort of get a sense that this is a very large glass space. So it is something that we need to take into account, so that it's a double volume space. Everywhere else will be single volume. The kitchen area we don't have to worry too much about at all. So yeah, this is where we're going to be working. Now, obviously, I'm going to create a new layer, so I'm going to come to my levels. I'm going to add on a level here, which automatically adds in this stage. We don't want to see the grass stage, so I'm going to turn it off so we can see our structure below, which is important for us to note where certain things are. The second floor of this asylum, of course, is going to be the bed area. It's going to be where most of the guests spend their nights. Now, what's important to realize about this kind of structure is that when you have a spa, it's ostensibly it's a health spa, you still would have segregation of the genders. So there'd be a male section and there'd be a female section. But we only have one staircase going up to that level, at least certainly from what the guests can achieve. So we automatically need to start thinking in our minds that at the top of that staircase, we're going to have to split the two groups apart. Men to the left, women to the right, however we want to do that. We also need to bear in mind that a lot of the time, this is the space, the actual upstairs, the bedrooms, where the most I would say, terror is going to start anyway. When our players arrive at this venue, they're going to be suspicious already. Why have they been invited to the spa? Well, I'm not going to go into those details, but they arrive. They're going to see the ground floor. Let me just go down to the ground floor so we can sort of walk through the experience that the players have. Now, I think this is something that we sometimes forget to do when we're running a game, is to actually walk ourselves through our own maps to get a sense of what we see. Well, we arrive in this very olive green lobby. There's a large desk. I'm busy looking at this reception desk here. And sitting behind it is the desk clerk and the concierge who shows us around. These stuffed heads sit on the walls next to shields with crossed swords, speaking of a golden era that was before now. The setting here is about the 1930s. Stepping through double doors, you enter into this long passageway that's got more olive green carpeting everywhere. At the end of there's a termination, and you can see sunlight filtering in through some French doors. At the far end, you can see a sign that says staff only, and that leads into the kitchen areas, perhaps. Stepping through, you get into a dining room. Beyond that, there is a lounge area with many, many sofas and chairs that looks out over the gardens and towards the pool house, etc. So when we're talking our characters through this, when we're taking our players through this, this is a fairly mundane space. They might be suspicious of the NPCs, the desk clerk, for example. Just how terrifying is that individual? Are they engaged? Are they not engaged? The concierge, the slimy individual who greets them and gets them to fill out their medical forms so that they can take part in this health spa. What about that? Is the NPC the dangerous factor? They might look around these rooms as they kind of go on a casual tour, but there's nothing here initially, anyway, that they're going to get introduced to that's suspicious. There are some doors that are locked, or as they're being taken on the tour, they're told, that door leads to the office of the administrator. You don't ever need to go through that, so don't worry about it. And you can see that there's a sign saying private staff only, or however it might be worded. So there are a few areas that might pique their interests from a terror, trauma, horror perspective, but not a lot. When they get to the pool room, of course, there's this statue that is carved and looks out over the pool. There is the chandeliers hanging directly above the water. It's 1930s, so they are electric by now. And there's this green slide that sort of splashes into the pool as well, and then small change rooms off to the left. Still not a huge amount of terror. I'm not feeling this sense of darkness yet. And that's something that I think is important, is that if they were to walk in and the bodies hanging everywhere and it's already dark and grim, that sets a very different tone. And if that's the tone you want to set, that's fine as well. There's nothing wrong with that. You can certainly do that. However, you do need to, at some point, start to let the players know that something is wrong. And I think we can achieve that in the second floor, in the bedrooms, because really, when are the PCs the most vulnerable? When there is a group, which is arguably when they're going to be accessing all of these facilities? No, they're most vulnerable when they're in their rooms. So it's about designing the rooms to carry over that theme, to show them the trauma, to show them the terror that they could potentially be facing. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to set up some stuff. I haven't done any preloading, so it might take a few minutes on the PC, but let's go in and do this. So we're going to go to the second floor now. The second floor is unlikely to be tiled. It could be. That certainly sends a much more clinical message, doesn't it? If the second floor where the bedrooms are still has tiles. Why do we put in tiles into places? Well, A, they're easy to clean. B, they're fairly hardy and robust, so you can have lots of traffic moving over without the carpets wearing out. And it creates an air of neatness, I suppose. Carpets, however, are a lot friendlier, a lot warmer. They make a space a lot more welcoming and inviting. Wooden floors are similar to carpets. There's a certain naturalness to the way that wood works, and there's a certain softness to wood, if I can be so bold. Tiles are hard and unyielding. Therefore, if our idea is to unsettle the players, we've just answered our own question. What should the floor be made out of? Floor tiles. It should be something that's hard. So in this case, I think we're going to go with... well, let's have a look at crypt. What does crypt give us? Fossil-like? No, I don't think so. I was hoping for just sort of modern-day ceramic tiles. I think we will find that, though, in the stone section. I think that'll come through here somewhere. So we're going to look for something that looks fairly cold, not very inviting, something that when the players step onto it, they know they're in a clinical space. Now, these tiles, it's called stone tiling, looks like it could fit the bill quite nicely. Otherwise, we've got old marble tiling here. You know, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the shape that it gives me. Yes, that to me feels like it's right, but it doesn't feel like it's the right color. Here, old marble stone looks much better, and I think that's actually what I used on the ground floor. So that gives us a rather interesting pattern. Maybe that's too much of a pattern, though. Maybe it makes it too interesting. What else have we got? We've got those tiles there. This is where I spend most of my time, by the way, when I'm doing something like this, is going, well, what should it be? What shouldn't it be? And then how can I change it? Those are crude stone tiles. We don't want crude stone tiles. No, hang on a moment. What are those? Stone tiling. That could be something. It's loading up. Yes, I think we're going to go with this. We'll have to experiment. That's the other thing. Okay, so that, and then the wall, of course, the walls we can choose anything that we like. I think the last one was just stone, worked stone of some kind. I think we can go with red brick now because we're sort of the second floor. So you could argue that this spa was originally an old castle which had big stone walls, and then they extended on top of it to build this additional kind of space, if you will, and we don't really have to worry too much about the inner wall because we're not going to be using that particular building technique. Okay, so we've kind of got what we're going for here. The only thing that I like to do is just to do an experimental build so we can see what the scaling is like, because for me the scaling is particularly important to see how that kind of works. So I'm going to just drop these pins here and we will have a look and see what this looks like. Yes, that to me looks fairly cold, but I think we can do better. And here we go. If you don't follow through, I hope I'm not blocking too much. I can make myself smaller actually, but yes, let's go through this and we're going to tweak the floor. So I want it to be colder, so I'm going to knock out the saturation, but I'm going to increase the lightness of this tiling so that it feels more like a clinical floor tile than anything else. So I'm going to really knock out the saturation, so we're getting rid of that kind of green tone. I can also play around with the colorizing option if I want to sort of try and push it away. Bluer is a little bit better. I hope you don't think I'm completely insane. So are these floor tiles the right size? Are they the wrong size? We're going to have to just play around and see how we can do what sort of effect we can achieve. So let's set them to 100% scaling. I find that too busy. I think that's going to be too busy, that size. Let's try 300. That doesn't feel to scale. No, I think 200 is about the right sort of variation. I think 200 kind of works there. Okay, good. So we've settled now. This is what it's going to be. 200. We've really changed these values around, so it's completely different to the original color, which I don't have a problem with. It just shows you the versatility that one has. And I'm just going to then carry on populating out this space. Now, I'm actually going to delete this because we don't need it at the moment, this particular room. What we do need to do is say, okay, so these stairs are coming up here where you can see my mouse. They're coming up. So there's going to be a corridor of some kind, or perhaps a navigational lobby, I think would make more sense. So what I do think we will do is we're going to put in a room here which overlooks the entranceway. Now, what's going to go in that room? Well, am I on the right layer? Hang on. You've got to always check that. Yes, I am on the right layer. Why is that so dark? I thought I'd set you to those values. Are you not at those values? Did I miss? I did a mistake somehow. I don't know how that happened. All right, so I think it was 88. I think it was it 28, and then this was all the way down there to like down there. So let's just make sure that these are the values that get carried through everywhere. So we're just going to make sure that that's working like that. Now, okay, so this room that's going to overlook the entrance, generally speaking, in a room like this, you're going to have the administrator, or you're going to have the big bad, if I can call them that, sort of looking down over who's arriving, and deciding, yes, we will sacrifice that one to the dark god, or however you might want to play it. I'm going to throw in some windows here so they can actually look down over the courtyard and see what's going on. And what I'm also going to do, because I think it creates quite a nice or quite an interesting option, is I'm going to put windows on the opposite side as well, so they can look down into the lobby area. Not a huge amount of the lobby area, because their office does sit over it, but it is going to give them a very overseer kind of perspective. Now, an interesting component when we're talking about maps, and this really does get us into the psychology of architectural design, is when you have a structure where an individual is elevated above and they look down, it automatically gives them a sense of status. We have to look up to the windows to see them. So when you look at the traditional layout of factories, of say, for example, command ships, ships in particular, sailing ships, military vessels, and those and the like, the captain often is elevated higher than the rest of the crew, so they have to look up and they need to see them. On sailing ships, the quarterdeck was where the captain would stand and everyone else would be below, except of course for those in the rigging. But the idea is that if someone is elevated, they're on that pedestal, we have to look up to them, they have to have some kind of importance. So when we're designing maps and things, maybe the players won't pick up on it. They probably won't, because they usually sort of look at room by room by room types of things. But at the same time, it might allow you to add that descriptor to this environment when they walk in, that there is this opening that leads up to the top floor and that they can see that there's a figure standing in the window glaring down at them as they arrive. So that's a room over there. That means that we now know we need to have at least one corridor running along here. So that's okay for me. I don't mind mirroring the corridor that is underneath there. So our staircase, which now arrives up here, we can now say, okay, great. There needs to be a space for into which they can then walk and possibly commingle before going into this administrator's office. So I'm going to create the corridor down which they can journey. So I think we're going to break away from the space now and do something more along these lines, or not break away from the space, sort of mirror the space, if you like. I'm creating quite a big room here, although it's not a room, it is literally a corridor. Again, just to remind ourselves that this is not a closed corridor, that it looks down onto the level below it. We're going to add in these sort of, these become columns, if you like, that allow you to look down and see who's arriving. So you can have those awfully 1930s tropes where the vixen stands at the top of the balcony looking down and waves majestically at the heroes as they arrive. Sort of, hello, darling, and then she sweeps down the staircase to come and say hello to the heroes themselves. So we can do all of those kinds of fun things once we've got this in place. So there's our corridor. It is fairly sterile, and we're going to keep it that way. So whereas the ground floor has got different sort of floor tiles and different looks, and it's got carpentry to try and make it feel more welcoming, in this case, it's going to be very cold, very mundane, very, very much the same. Now, we've got this corridor leading off down here. I think we can safely say that it's going to meet another corridor. I know this might feel like we're just doing corridors, but, well, we pretty much are. This corridor is going to run all the way to, let's see, that's the administrator office there. Yes, we're going to make this another corridor. And this will lead into the men's section, I suppose you could say, where the men are going to stay. We've got this space where we can put in a room. Absolutely, we're going to do that. We've also got this space which we know has got plumbing. Now, I know that this is a little bit of a pedantic kind of approach, and you certainly do not need to adopt this if you are designing maps. Because the plumbing is all there, it makes sense for the rest of the plumbing to be there as well on the second floor. It also allows us, from a map designing perspective, to have a grate in that floor as well, which washes down into this one. It's not very hygienic by any standards, but that does give us a drain pipe or a connection of some kind that our player characters could potentially exploit if they need to get out of this map in a hurry. I'm going to do a corridor up this way. This is going to be a nice long... Oh, we're running out of building. Okay, so we're going to go to there. I'm making my corridors fairly standard in terms of their size. And I think we can do that. Do we want to close it off? We're going to do this. So this is how one would access the ladies section. I'm going to build them out over here. Right, so we've got our corridors in place, and now it's just a question of, all right, so if this is going to be the bathroom area here, which again I don't have a problem with, I'm going to actually build it a little bit differently. I'm going to follow the contours that have been established. I'm going to come down here and close it off so we have a room there, and I am going to label this space so that I don't forget what it is, especially when you're dealing with spaces that look very similar with these kind of floor tiles and things. It does make sense. I'm going to call this the bathroom. Right, I could also label the level, the layer itself. I could come here and go to rooms, highlight this one. This might be easier actually. Bathroom, press enter. So this can work very well as well. Just really depends on how much floor space, screen space you've got really. Okay, so those are the bathrooms. So what that means is, in order to access the bathrooms, the ladies need to run the risk of encountering the men. And again, I'm not sure that I'm completely comfortable with that in terms of a narrative for the period. So we've got the scullery and the laundry down here. So I'm going to use that then. Now, like I said, it really is just me being very, very pedantic, going, well, in the 1930s, they would never have allowed men and women to share showers. Even putting them next to each other would be considered something of a rather lewd act. They might say, well, only the French would do something like that. It's not very polite whatsoever. However you want to phrase it, that's certainly a reaction that I wouldn't disbelieve. So I like to try and keep it at least to the point that you go, well, yeah, okay, yeah, that I can understand why. So this is the I'm going to say F bathroom, female bathroom. So we're keeping them separated like that because it is the 1930s. All right, so this is the female dormitory here. So what we now have the choice of doing is, do we give them separate rooms or do we give them sort of bigger rooms? And I think what we're going to do is we're going to give them a dormitory style room because, again, I'm not sure how many players might be involved in this. So we're going to give them one dormitory style room, which is this big. Then we're going to give them one adjacent, which I think will be the same sort of length. So we get this very, like I said, dormitory style, school style setting. This tower has to remain almost separate on its own. So I've realized that. Now I'm going to come back here. I'm going to grab my points and just make it a little bit bigger so that we can just fill up that space. Maybe it's too big now, so let's bring it in there and bring this one in here. And I've purposely left this small room. I'm going to make that a secret room. What's going to go into that secret room, I'm not entirely sure. All right, great. So we've got this space here. This is a very large bathroom, but I suppose once we put in the showers and that sort of thing, the space is going to get taken up. The tower here is where this doctor conducts his evil experiments. So I don't have an issue. I'm going to come back to this room because it's going to have different styling. It's not clinical. It's not designed to be so cold. What we are going to do here is we're going to say, all right, so then let's say there's a movie star who comes to visit and she's going to want her own private little room, isn't she? Or at least I think she would. So we're going to build off a series of for the women only rooms that they will be able to access. And also, if we have player characters, this is what we're going this is where we're going to put them. Remember, it's about separating them so that the sense of horror, of dread comes through. Now, what I have also purposefully done, although it might not appear so, is that I have left this little 5-foot gap here. Now, this 5-foot gap is very, very specifically designed that we have secret passageways. Because when I think of a health spa or an asylum or something along those lines, I think of secret corridors where they can observe the inmates as they are in progress. Now, the big dormitory, I'm not too worried about. We've got this whole wall here where we can put in sort of secret windows so they can observe the women as they go about their business. But this side, these 3 rooms, you need to have some kind of accessibility. And I think your accessibility would be somewhere along this corridor into this very narrow space. Why a narrow space? Well, when the doctors are moving around down there, 5 foot is actually very, very wide. I can't get my finger in there. 5 foot is actually, it's big. It's almost a meter. Well, it's over a meter, isn't it? So that's not actually that narrow a corridor. However, it does mean that the characters, when they're running down it, they have to go in single line. They could sort of squeeze sideways with each other. But it's about building that sense of claustrophobia, which I particularly want to develop and to have permeate throughout this entire space, because that is ultimately what we're after. So again, we've got this corridor that we can build in here. I don't have a problem just knocking in another corridor that leads there. Are we lucky enough to be able to do that? Yes, because we can make these long rooms this way, so that we have 2 long rooms next to each other. Again, for say persons of importance. Possibly these rooms we can convert later on into something that we need for guards to stay in if we want to. This is the area where we don't have too much of a plan. We don't need to have too much of a plan, because our primary focus is on where our players' characters are going to be sleeping, and I think we're handling that quite well from the ladies' side of things. So we've now got our little corridor. I'm going to leave it again for the tile effect. We've set that up now, so we might as well just finish off with that. Any room that doesn't have those tiles is a room that's accessible by staff only. That's kind of what's going through my head at the moment. So we've got some rooms here. We're going to have the men's dormitory. So I'm going to extend that all the way out here and just say that the men's dormitory sits directly above the stable yard, the carriage yard, the vehicle yard, and that sort of thing. So it's just this big room that they have access to. Then in terms of private rooms, I think, again, it's about deciding how we want to do it. Do we want a corridor that leads off there? No, I think that's a bit messy. Could we put private rooms in here? No, I think I want to save that for there. All right, so we're going to put in some private rooms here. So the men are going to get these private rooms, which are, this will break quite nicely into a 3x3. Or possibly that'll be the male nurses' station, so they can monitor people. We'll have to think about that one. And then over here, we're going to do the same kind of effect. Again, though, we do want to have that corridor accessibility for our secret observations. Men, I think, in this time period, they wouldn't necessarily have a problem with accessing your private room via the common room, if you like, where most of the men are going to be sleeping. If that really does bother me later on, I can come and change the size of this room. Right, so then this is going to be another private observation room there. If necessary, I could also devote this space here to more rooms, private rooms, and I think I'm actually going to do that. We're going to have a nice room here for a player, maybe a loudmouth player or a guest, a celebrity. If in the module we want them to have a specific character who's really important, we can throw them in there. Okay, then we get into actual rooms that are used by the staff. So I'm going to leave the walls the same. I'm going to change the floor now. We can go wooden, I think, because, well, why wouldn't you? No pun intended. And let's choose something like this. Let's have a look. We do have to reset our values here because, of course, it's still applied. Unless we think white wood. No, I don't think we need white wood, so I'm just going to knock these back down to 0, 0, 0, 0. So there's no modifications on them whatsoever. So it is the original color. And we're going to come in here and just fill in. Boom, boom, boom. There's another administrator's office, if you like. Close that off. Oh, that's very fancy flooring. I think it's too fancy for what we're trying to do here. Let's try this one. Okay, so this is going to be like a nurse's station, this little room here, which is where they'll sit and make sure that none of the male inhabitants try and sneak across to the female side of things. Then, as we know, we've got our corridors, and our corridors, I want us to make them feel different so that we, at a glance, when we're looking at our map, can see them as being different as well. And I'm going to just go back to sort of a more traditional tile. No, tiles and dirt won't work. Night shaded brick and stone, that might work there. Okay, great. And now, ordinarily, if it's a secret passageway, it wouldn't arguably have a window at the end, and I would make a strong case against that if I was designing this as an architect for someone to utilize. I'm not designing it as an architect. I'm designing it as someone who's going to run a game. So we put windows at the end so that, and I'm going to do that now before I forget. We put windows at the end so that the players, if they make let's say they're struggling with this whole thing and they don't seem to be coming right, they need some help, and that often happens and is required. I can now give them that help by saying, well, as a matter of fact, whilst you are out in the gardens exploring whatever it is that you are exploring, you've gone to the maze, because there's a maze down here that we've built in. You've gone to the maze. You look up and you notice that there's a third window. You can't account for it. You can see the bathroom and you can see the front room, which is for celebrities and things, but next to it there's a window that you can't make out, and you see a figure standing there looking out over the gardens. So that is absolutely and utterly a clue for the players to go, how do you get to that window? And then they can start pacing things out and going, well, if we walk down this corridor, because they might arguably have access to this corridor, if we walk down this corridor, then we could probably access this point. Yeah, okay. Maybe there's a secret door, and then they feel for secret doors, and bingo, they find the passageway which allows them access into here. Does that give them anything really to work with? No, but it does allow them to go, there's secret passageways everywhere. This is bad. And now we can explore and investigate and try and understand what's going on and make a plan from there. I think that to me is a good way of allowing players to discover something without it feeling necessarily forced, that they've had to. They kind of work it out. You don't give them much more than that. You don't need to give them much more than that, because you have given them something. They should pick up on it and go, oh, all right, well, if there's a window that's in the wrong place. The point is, you've given them something to work with. All right, so now we've basically got our layout. I'm not entirely happy with some of the positioning of the corridors and things. I think that could be possibly done in a better way. I'll have to look into that. But overall, I think that this room, this layout now, is working a lot better for us. Well, it's just working for us, and it gives us this very interesting space. This is a huge map, by the way. And like I said, I've made it big on purpose so that our players can run around and engage and sort of get a real sense that they are in this health spa, and it's not a safe place to be. The only thing that I'm going to do now, and that's purely for aesthetic, is just to come through to roofing and to find roof tiles that I think would be appropriate. Again, it's about deciding what's going to work for you, and I think this is what's going to work for me. Let's try out the scaling. We just want to cap off any rooms that don't extend to the second floor. It's just neater, it looks nicer, and it gives the players a sense of height. that maybe they don't appreciate. The tiles are moving in the wrong direction as far as my eye is concerned. So it's just a case of going 1, 8, 0, enter, and now they're flowing down. The shadows are in the right place. I think, I don't know, that's just me personally. I love the grey idea because, again, it perpetuates this sense. I'm going to go to my layers quickly and just go to the rooms and make this roof room, take it all the way down to the bottom so that it sits underneath. I know it's a small thing, but it just allows them to sit underneath this wall rather than on top of it. So it feels sort of as if it's lower. I don't think there's any other rooms that I need to cap with a roof. There is a secret room that I've forgotten all about, which I will have to think about. As a matter of fact, I'm actually not going to go with it as a secret room because accessing it would be difficult. I'm going to fill it up with roof. So that means that you've got this funny little shape. Now, you could argue and say, well, would they really have that? Oftentimes, old buildings, the architecture was built, it was built in stages. Now, we've already established that it's been built in stages in this place. We've got the old-fashioned medieval stonework underneath, and we've got the brickwork on the second floor. So you sometimes had these weird and wonderful spaces, and what they would do, rather curiously, I find anyway, especially by modern-day aesthetics, is that they would put windows here, which definitely allowed in natural light. So you would save on your sort of electric bills and that sort of thing because you wouldn't have so many windows. But they would look directly into one another. And you go, well, that's very, very strange, especially in this case because this is a bathroom. So who's looking into that bathroom? Those are tinted windows. Let's go with that. Right. So this area here we have established is just a double volume sort of space. And it's something that I don't know if one can do, as a matter of fact. I'll have to go and ask them on the forums. Is it possible for you to have a second floor with a see-through floor? So you can indicate. Yes, it is, as a matter of fact. I've solved it myself, by Jove. And this is exactly how we're going to do it. So we've got our wall selected. We're going to go all the way around. Boom, boom, boom. And then what we're going to do is, before we get there, we're going to come back on ourselves and do this, and hopefully we get our wall without our floor, and then we're going to go there, there, and then come back again, and we're going to close up that wall over there. So in theory, it's actually making a room that's just one line thick, but it allows us to create this space exactly how we would want it. The bathrooms certainly would not be double volume. They would only be a single volume bathroom type of space. I'm going to close that off. I'm going to come in here, do our usual trick of just making sure that the rotation of the roof is correct. And I think that puts it at 270. Let's have a look. Yes. Okay. So 270 puts it there. And now we just need to obviously go into these and throw in our windows. So again, we get that wonderful volume sort of sense that this pool room is just full of light that just allows the light to come in all over the space and fill her up. Now, when we export this room, obviously it's not going to have a floor, which, you know, if you even print out this part, because I think that's the important thing, is how are you going to use these maps as well? You know, how are you going to show them to your players? Some might actually go to the process of printing them out, and DungeonFog has the most remarkable process for printing out these maps. It really does a good job of allowing you to do that very, very easily. But even if you're just going to show them digitally, at least now you know that there's a double volume here as well as that little roof. So let's just zoom out here so we can see pretty much everything. There is our structure. At this zoom out distance, it doesn't look very pretty, but again, we've got the lights disabled. We did that right at the beginning of the video, and now you know we've got some secret passageways so that we can have all of that scary stuff. We've got our Imperial Doctor looking down on the foyer as the people arrive, not only in the driveway, but then when they walk through the lobby, he stares down on people walking up the stairs. So there's that very, very ominous kind of feeling. And we've got those white floor tiles to make sure that there's a clinical sense to this entire space. But it gives us those wonderful moments where the PCs are coming back from dinner and there's a nurse just quietly mopping the floor of blood all over the floor. And they say, oh, what caused that? Oh, no, we spilled the tray. We were taking steak up to the Lord and to we drop the tray and there's steak blood. It's really steak blood all over the floor. Nothing to worry about. Go and enjoy your rest in your room now. That's certainly something to send chills down the PC's spines or to make them follow the maid, etc., etc., etc. And they can see her disappearing down to various places within the structure. I hope this has helped inspire you. It's been a little bit of a long video, but, well, you know, it takes time to go through these things. I hope it's inspired you to think differently about the next time you're building a space in terms of how do you make it creepier using architecture and, of course, the map. And we can go in and change and tweak this as we so need. I hope it has been helpful. If it has, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. And until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.